Welcome to the creative community. I'm your host, David Starkey, and my guest this time is artist Lynda Weinman. Lynda, welcome.
Thank you.
We are going to see a world of clay today and other materials, and we're going to talk about your work as a ceramicist and especially using 3D printing technology, right?
Correct.
So before we look at the first image, I know people may know you from your company,
Sure.
Lynda.com, but can you talk a little bit, and sort of give us some context for how you came to kind of designing things on the computer that would ultimately be printed?
Sure. I know when we look at my slides, I kind of put them in there chronologically
Right.
so that I could talk through that particular story. But I wanted to have a ceramic studio. My husband was building a custom house, and we're retired. And I had done ceramics in high school, and I just remembered that I loved it. And I had hoped to get back to that in retirement.
Right.
And that was basically the genesis of wanting to be involved with ceramics.
Right.
And I took a class at Community Center here in Santa Barbara, and it just didn't really float my boat. I was, I had thrown before, I made another pot, and it succeeded, but it wasn't that gratifying. I was sort of disappointed that I had asked for the studio, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, I better, figure out if I really like this or not. So I took a class at Anderson Ranch, which is in Colorado. And that class kind of tied me back to my technical roots because it was digital fabrication for ceramic molds. And it was utilizing 3D software to design molds. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. Maybe I can combine my tech background with ceramics. And then once I did that, I got completely hooked.
Right. So now, if I'm remembering correctly, you sort of got your start doing animation and special effects in
Correct.
movies, right?
Yes, and also a lot of just 2D graphics and computer graphics in general.
Right.
And I used to teach computer graphics, and I dabbled a little bit in 3D back then. But
It would have been really rudimentary, I think.
Yes, although a lot of the principles are the same in every 3D program. It's kind of just similar. You usually have 4 views, and you can see the front and the side, the back and the top.
Right.
And, you have to sort of navigate in 3D space.
Okay.
And then there are different terms for some of the operations that you would do to make certain shapes.
Well, we're going to see all that come to life here momentarily. But I think the first slide that we have is not actually. Tell us about this.
Well, I wanted to bring this up because my husband built with architect Robin Donaldson, who's local, the first parametric house in Santa Barbara, and probably the first parametric house in all of California, if not the US. And so you can see that the designs are very different than a normal rectilinear home.
Right.
And he was just enjoying designing this house so much, and I was feeling like, gee, I wonder what I could do, to be as happy as he is building this house. And so that led me to ask him if he would build me a studio. And then I figured, I better make sure I really like ceramics before I build this studio.
And we just had a guest on, Gwyn Lurie, who was, I think this is a cover story in the Riv.
Correct.
Yeah,
yes.
not too long ago.
Yes.
So that must be an interesting sort of back and forth that the two of you guys have as you're talking about your different projects, right?
Truly. And what was really shocking to me when I went and took that class in Colorado was I was being taught exactly the same software that we were using to build our house. That was a shocker.
You already have that on my computer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Let's take a look at the next one, and I think this is called First Pot. Right?
Yeah, so this is when I took the community college class.
Right.
What I threw, and the teacher said to me, it looks like you've done this before.
Right.
And, all the muscle memory came back.
Yeah.
It had been 50 years since I'd thrown a pot.
But it's a beautiful, simple piece.
It's a beautiful yet simple piece. And and it was just, I don't know, it just didn't do much for me. So I was hoping that I, would maybe go to hand building or just learn some different techniques that were more exciting to me. But even though I came out with a pot, I wasn't that excited or inspired, really.
Okay, all right. So the next image that we have, we're looking. Who is this working right now?
Okay, so this was my teacher, Del Harrow, who was teaching the digital fabrication of molds class.
Okay.
And he's one of the pioneers in that space. And so for a lot of people who do ceramics, mold making is a pretty conventional process. And mostly you would make molds off physical objects, or you would hand create a mold. And in this case, we were designing the molds in the computer.
Yeah.
Yes, and then using a CNC machine to mill the molds.
And we're going to see. I mean, what struck me is how there's these really natural or naturalistic forms that you sort of get out of this, super high tech programming. So let's move on, and I think we're going to see the next one. Okay, this is a computer screen.
Correct.
Right?
So
Yeah.
this was the first thing that I modeled. It was going to be a tray. And I was, teaching myself how to use, this is Rhino 3D. That was the software that I discovered in this class, was the same software that the architects were using to build our house. And of course, this is a way more simple form than what they were doing, but I think I show in one of the slides the final outcome of this particular work, but it was going to be CNC'd with a milling machine, and so the machine looks at the code and knows where to put the drill and how to make this form based on the computer instructions.
Well, when we're looking at this, obviously you're starting with a blank screen. I mean, are there options for you to select from to get here? Yeah.
So, yes, many options.
Right.
Yes.
And then you're kind of tweaking that as you go along.
Yes, and I had that in my mind's eye, that particular form, but sometimes I do what I call form finding in the computer, where I'm just going through a lot of different shapes and then finding the thing that speaks to me and then going down that rabbit hole one way or another.
Well, I think that the next one may be actually the piece itself.
Yes, this is the piece upside down.
Okay.
So I'm not really showing the mold, but you just still have to do hand building and attach a foot, and these are all things that any ceramicist would need to know how to do.
And so is that something that you do by hand yourself then?
Yes, I did that, and it was actually the first time I'd ever done it was in this class.
Okay.
So I sort of lied to get into the class. You were supposed to be an intermediate ceramicist, and I just thought I would be able to take to the software pretty quickly so that I could maybe fake my way through the rest. But I was very embarrassed to be asking all the other students how to do things like so rudimentary, but I did not know how.
Yeah. But I'm sure they were very
They were.
generous
I
and
mean,
kind,
people are so uptight about not knowing when you're new to something, and you think everybody is gonna, look down on you, and actually, it's quite the opposite. I think people enjoy helping each other.
I do, and we were talking before the show about the creative community as a larger endeavor, and I do think that that's something for people to remember, whatever art field they're in, is that there are people out there who want to help you.
Definitely. I think we all are, the star of our own movie or whatever. We're all very, thinking, oh, I have, a hair out of place, or I have, this shirt doesn't fit me right, or whatever. And then everybody else is just worrying about their own hair and their own shirt.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot of self-consciousness that comes with being a new artist.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is just totally, in your way and fabricated by you.
Yeah.
It's not true.
Good point. Well, let's take a look at the next one. I think this is this the finished product right
Yes,
here? Yeah.
That's the finished piece. You can kind of see the resemblance to the computer model.
And now what is it made out of?
It's made out of B-mix, which is a type of ceramic clay, white clay.
Yeah. It's got a beautiful shine on it.
Yes, I used some underglaze and some clear, I think.
And later on, I think we're going to see an image of you glazing away.
Probably.
Yeah. So the actual creation of it, it comes from your mind to the computer. It's printed out, but then there's a lot of work afterwards. It seems like.
Definitely. It's my husband loves to say that I'll do anything that that involves pushing a button, but I think he fails to witness all the other things that I do besides push that button.
Okay, well, we'll see. We'll get a glimpse of that. Let's see what's our next thing. I think this might be.
This is when I first got my clay printer, which was after I took that class,
Right.
and it was actually at the very, very beginning of COVID. And so I was sort of on my own learning this in my dining room. We turned my dining room into a 3D clay printing room.
Right.
And I was watching YouTube videos and just reaching out to people who knew how to do it and trying to teach myself every which way.
Yeah. It was such a weird time for everybody. I think artists in particular with this kind of feeling of detachment and great uncertainty what's going to happen. Did you find that was making these figures, was that something that was reassuring somehow?
Oh, I was having the greatest time.
Yeah,
I kept saying to everybody, I think I'm the only person on the planet who loves the pandemic. But, you know, for me to just have time to focus on learning something new and do something so fun and interesting was really a joy.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at the next image that we have here. So this is, I think, another video showing the
just
process.
the process of how the printing actually works. It's a big tube, and it's filled with wetter clay than normal. So in the beginning, I was buying clay that had been pre-hydrated and was the right kind of clay for a 3D printer. But eventually, I got a pug mill when I got more serious about it, which is a clay mixing device. And so now I put water into the clay and mix it myself and fill tubes myself, and it's all part of the process.
Yeah, but things go wrong, I know from talking to other ceramicists all the time when you're working with clay. I mean, any spectacular stories of things not going right?
I mean, what's been really interesting, there's also this sort of wabi-sabi school of, you know, embrace the imperfections, embrace the mistakes. And I've found that I love it actually when the machine kind of goes off the rails and makes, I call them beautiful disasters, where it just makes a big pile of crazy noodles. And sometimes they're so beautiful, and there is an element of sort of machine and man in there. It's just this really interesting sort of half algorithmic, half just big mess of nothing that makes sense.
Right.
And I actually have made pieces out of that.
Oh, that's great.
And I call them beautiful disasters. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's kind of an essential part of the creative process anyway, is
Definitely.
just going awry and kind of fixing things as you go
Definitely,
along.
and also making up your own rules. You know, I often say, for me, what being an artist is I am a problem solver, but I'm inventing problems, and then I'm solving my own problems that I've invented. And I'm inventing a set of rules that are in my head. They're really not, you know, in stone. I mean, there are certain rules of gravity and physics and things like that you can't do anything about. But there also are just rules about what's acceptable, what's a mistake, what's beautiful, what isn't. Those are all more subjective.
Now, as you're working on these pieces, are you drawing on a kind of mental topography of different pieces that you admire, different artists that you admire?
I probably, you know, I think I do love polka dots a lot, and I've been a big fan of Yayoi Kusama for a long time, and you know, her work is you know,
it's wild.
It's wild, but it's also involves a lot of repetitive patterns and patterning, and I love surface design. I love pattern, and I am very, you know, well aware of art history and especially modern art, and so I do have influences, but I also really like to do things that are more original or are taking me down, I call them rabbit holes, but just an area of interest. I get interested in a certain feature or a certain idea and then just keep going and taking it further and further until I'm bored or distracted with the next idea.
Yeah. Well, let's take another look at some of these ideas.
Sure.
It's interesting always just to sort of hear the abstraction and then to go take a look and see what happens.
Definitely, and I mean, I think for some, you know, painters who are painting realistically or even abstract painters who may have, you know, something fully fleshed out in their mind before they're putting pen to paper or whatever. For me, I don't always. There are times that I do, and then there definitely are a lot of happy accidents and little, side trips that I take because I find things interesting.
Okay, yeah. So what
Yeah,
are
so
we
this,
looking at here?
I put this up here because in the very beginning it was so mysterious to me. I would see a lot of pieces that people were posting, but I would never see the model. And I thought that it was sort of interesting to show, I think I have another slide too, that shows what the actual model looked like and then what the end piece looks like. So you can kind of see on the lower right how that really spiky piece turned out with all these loops.
Yeah.
And, sometimes it's just very mysterious. And I started to blog about, how to do things and ask questions about why certain things were true. And it was just a great way for me to document my own learning journey.
Yeah. So that's your clay buttress.
I am clay buttress.
How did you come up with that idea?
I was just trying to think of a name for my blog.
Right.
And, I guess, I don't know, it's funny, I just thought of this, but like lynda.com was very clearly a female-led, idea. And so I guess putting the sort of feminine buttress in there also kind of nods to the fact that this is female.
Well, yeah, and I hear the word bot and goddess kind of sort of.
True.
Yeah.
And also, there's sort of the, am I into S&M or something, there's sort of that as well. Which
a
I'm
little
not,
warning
but,
on the front, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But there's sort of the that connotation as well. I just thought it was a cute name.
Yeah, no, it's cool. And so is this, if somebody wanted to go here, could they purchase
They
your
could,
pieces?
no, but they could read about my very
about your
early
process,
journey and my process. And this is my living room table, my dining room table,
Yeah.
where I had set up my art studio during COVID.
So do you have the studio now that you were talking about?
I have an amazing studio
Okay,
now.
so
yes.
you don't have to do it in the dining room.
No, I
anymore.
don't.
Let's take a look at the
My
next
husband's very happy. He
Yeah,
doesn't
I'll bet.
find little clay handprints all over the house anymore. This was, one of my kiln loads, and I bought the kiln also during COVID, and I taught myself how to load it on YouTube. And I was really, kind of isolated learning this craft. But I also got to meet a lot of interesting people. I started to study with different teachers and watch a lot of YouTube videos and lynda.com courses and all kinds of things on 3D modeling. And
It turned out to be a handy resource
it
for you.
was actually, and I have often used it for my own learning.
Right.
But it was kind of fun after, being retired to go back and use it as well. It's
Right.
cool.
Well, I'm going to take a look. I think we're starting to move towards actually some of the specific pieces here.
Yeah, this is a piece that I collaborated with Patrick Hall, who we actually had a show at Sullivan Goss, and he's an extremely accomplished and established potter and works very large. He has, he's kind of a super tall, big guy. His hands are like twice the size of mine, and he throws enormous pots. And we were together at the community clay studio in Goleta, and he was looking at some of the 3D things that I was printing, and he had this idea that we could combine my work and his, and it was a very successful collaboration. We ended up having a show at Sullivan Goss together, and that was something that I wanted to bring up because for me, collaborating with other artists has been a way to really grow my own experiences and my own abilities and confidence. And so that was a real joy to get to work with Patrick and see our two different crafts combined like that. And I think he got really excited as well.
Well, so what would be the specific nature of the collaboration? What did you do and what did he do?
Well, if we go back to that picture, the neck of the piece is 3D printed.
Okay.
And the base of it is thrown, and then he made the lid. So he did the lion's share of the work here.
But you're making different
But
parts,
I'm giving
basically.
him
Yeah.
a part that he is, that he would not have known how to do, nor would I have known how to do what he did.
Gotcha.
And so it became a collaboration.
Let's take a look at the next image we have up here.
This is just showing some of the software. it's a little bit visual. This is called Grasshopper, and it's a type of parametric algorithmic software that you can kind of put together like circuit boardery, and you can make things with sliders and, things like you were asking, can I make the spikes bigger or smaller? Things like that. So I just thought it would be interesting to show your audience what it looks like.
Yeah, it looks really complicated.
It does. It looks a little bit intimidating.
It's way over my head.
True.
Now here's the
Here's
show.
our show that we
Yeah.
had together, and I'm excited to say that I've been asked by Sullivan Goss to have a new show, and that is going to open in a couple weeks.
Okay, so this will be February?
It's opening at the end of January,
January?
27th through March 27th.
Okay, so if people are watching this in the far distant future, we're talking about 2023.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, very good point.
Okay, so what are we looking at here?
Okay, so these are my insecurity trophies. I was asked by a good friend of mine to make a trophy for an event. She's an event planner. And on the road to making her perfect trophy, I had all of these mistakes and mishaps. And then I realized there was sort of a real profundity to the mistakes.
Right.
And giving yourself a trophy for a failure or for, something that we say to ourselves, like, for me, the fighting, am I good enough? Like, am I worthy enough to be an artist?
Right.
Do I deserve to put so much of my effort and energy into being an artist? And so, to me, the insecurity trophies were a piece of work that I did that I was really proud of, because, and it's funny because I got asked to do a trophy also for the 1-805 organization, and their logo is a heart, and I was making heart vases for them. But then a lot of them were cracking and they weren't working right. And then I looked at those and said, well, isn't that the way love is? Like,
perfect.
isn't this this is more interesting than a perfect heart.
Right.
To have a cracked heart, And so I think sometimes, I don't know, you listen to some artists and they talk about all the meaning in their work. And I'm not sure that I always believe that they knew the meaning before they started.
Till the crack happened.
For me, till the crack happened. And so to me, as I was making these trophies, I just realized that that's a really important idea, that usually you're giving it for what you think of as good, but that there is a lot of failure in art, especially in ceramics, as you pointed out. And also, we're so hard on ourselves. For me, I was literally ashamed to go to that workshop and not know how to do ceramics. Right. And I think as I was introducing myself, I even got teary. And there were a lot of other people too who seemed, to be apologizing for what they didn't know. Yeah. And that's been something that I'm very happy I've overcome, and it's behind me. But I would say in the beginning, it was a big struggle to get over that.
We only got about 5 minutes left, Lynda, and I want to make sure that we get a look at as much of your work as possible.
Yeah,
so
this was for Lotus Land had a fundraiser, and they invited me to come to the garden, get inspired by plants. And so I made a bunch of pieces, and these are some of them. And that I also wanted to mention as a technique to learn and grow. You can advance to the next one, is just, to be given an assignment is really a great exercise. Great, and the fact that I wasn't, I didn't go to art school, I didn't study any of this. It was, for me, my own challenge. And I just was really proud of the work that I did. And it even sold, and they made, raised money for Lotus Land, which was super cool. Yeah. So yeah, we can keep moving through stuff. And treasures. This was something that I made with Joan, actually. We got asked by the curator could we make a 6-foot tall cactus, and we did. And so those are her flowers and my 3D printed cactus parts.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've got a few of Joan's flowers in my backyard.
Oh, yeah, I bet. They're so beautiful. Yeah. And then there was this article that got written, just included that. And then I was invited to be in a show very early on. This is maybe 2 years ago at Porch Gallery, and I thought my name will never be next to Beatrice Wood, but there it is. So
there it is.
That was pretty amazing. And I also learned that my cousin was in it as well, who I didn't know. So now this is work that I've been doing for the show that's coming up with Sullivan Goss, and the name of the show is regeneration. And so these are some different pieces that I've been working on for the show, and this is some of my newer work.
Wow.
And I've actually brought a couple of pieces with me too.
Yeah, and
for the same show.
Yeah.
So these are some close-ups of some of this work that I'll be showing.
So the pieces that you brought, can you tell us about them?
Yes. So let's see. This is a gazing ball. I just realized that I've been making a lot of functional ware, and I'm starting to get into more sculptural work, and that it's okay to just have an object to meditate on the object. And so
And that's made out of?
this is made out of clay.
Okay.
And this is a metallic glaze. Jim Haggerty, I don't know if you've ever had him on the show.
I have not, no.
He's an incredible ceramicist, master potter, but also he's been working on these glaze recipes for 40 years. And they're very, very beautiful.
And I won't
They're
have
called
you pick
lusters.
that other one is a little bit difficult to pick up, but could you just
No, I
describe
can
it
get
for
it.
me? Okay.
I'm probably going to take the lid off.
I'll take that for you.
Okay. This is in my Trippy Apothecary Jar series. And this is a lattice apothecary jar. So it's obviously can't really hold
Too much apothecary
no,
stuff.
can't hold anything liquid or solid. And I love to make things with lids. And then this is also plastic print. So I do work in other mediums. This involves resin, beads, plastic, and ceramics.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, we're down to literally our last minute, Lynda. So I kind of have a 30-second question for you.
Okay.
If you can, in just the shortest time, what advice would you give to someone who is just out there watching the show and they're out there saying, I want to do something like this?
Boy, I would start with the software because I think that's a big learning curve if you already know ceramics.
And then from there on out, it's kind of this great kind of
Trial and
creative journey.
error,
Yeah,
and it's a big fight.
Yeah.
I say all the time, I'm fighting my machines, but I'm going to win.
Yeah.
Like anybody who works on the computer, you're constantly having problems every direction.
Right. Well, that's kind of an interesting note to end on.
True.
Lynda, thank you so much for being on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Creative Community is a co-production of TVSB in Santa Barbara and CAPS Media in Ventura. It's made possible by a generous grant from Diana and Simon Robb. I'm your host, David Starkey, and we'll see you next time.